Okay, hi, I'm Brian. I'm co-owner and lone cartographer of Dynamic Planning Plus Science. And today I'm going to show you a workflow that I use a lot, leveraging data merge in InDesign. And I use this it allows me high volume map production without necessarily sacrificing interesting design elements. So this example involves the project area shown on screen here. This is Sacramento County's California Delta. The project involves mapping a series of 25 hypothetical levee breaches, the yellow points here. And those breaches occur on about a dozen reclamation districts. And a reclamation district is simply an island surrounded by a ring levee. It's basically a man-made island. And these islands, the land is subsiding, so most of them sit below sea level. So if a levee breaks, they're basically going to be compromised, and the county wants to map where the highest depths are going to occur. The reclamation district geometry serves crucially as the index features for the map automation that I'll show you. So each breach scenario is mapped in 3 different ways at the extent of the corresponding reclamation district. There's going to be a total of 75 maps in this set. The one shown here highlighted is the maximum depth map. And there's all 25 of those. Then there's the time to 1 foot inundation maps, another 25 for that set. And finally, the evacuation route maps, where the evacuation routes will change depending on where the breach is. So sometimes we've modeled multiple breaches for the same island and the routes need to change. And there's the next 25, that's 75 maps. I'm going to focus on the maximum depth layout, kind of break it down. The layout itself is nothing too special. It's pretty standard engineering type map layout. I've made a lot of these. It gets kind of tiring. I always try to change how these are laid out, and it always comes back to this kind of standard layout. But I do like to add some extra features to elevate the design as much as I can. So I'll break it down into its components and then show you how each is created and then pushed into InDesign to auto-generate 25 map layouts. So the components, just quickly, the map frame, the legend, the locator map, scale bar, and the map collar. So now I'll get into how each of those components is created. The main map consists of 4 layers, 4 parts. There's the vector base, the background image, the depth raster, and then the breach label. So here's the vector layer alone on the layout. And this vector layer is created in ArcMap using data-driven pages. So the layout in ArcMap is set to fit the space I have on my full map layout, and then I use those reclamation district features to drive the data-driven page series. So it zooms to each extent and cycles through each one of those. And there's also page-based definition queries going on here. So the appropriate breach symbol is shown, and the appropriate map notes are shown for corresponding to each breach scenario. So these are all exported as a set through data-driven pages as individual PDFs, and these are my vector layers, 1 PDF for each breach. They're named accordingly, so I don't think you could see it in the back, but vector underscore the breach number. So we'll get back to that, but here's the background image. Just notice that it's black and white, fairly subdued, acts as reference. And this map uses the same exact MXD, just make a copy of it, strip all the layers, same index feature, the reclamation districts. And here I have just the Esri image service as the lone information. Again, these are exported as individual PDFs. And this interface that I think I've shown a couple times, and I'll keep showing it, is Adobe Bridge. It's basically just a file explorer. But in Bridge, I can select files and execute batch commands in Photoshop. So I have a pre-saved action in Photoshop to apply the black and white effect and bump down the contrast and brightness a little bit. So I send that through Photoshop. It saves a JPEG version of each one of those images in black and white automatically for me. So I don't have to go open each one individually and apply this action. So there they are. Then there's the depth raster is on its own layer on the layout. Again, same MXD, another copy, same index layer, the reclamation districts. But there is an individual raster for every depth, for every breach scenario. So there's an individual depth raster. They exist in the ArcMap document as separate layers. And you'll see as it cycles through here, the layer visibility toggles. So there's a scale dependency. Whatever the scale of my index feature, the appropriate breach raster will be visible based on a scale dependency. And again, these are exported to individual PDFs named corresponding to the breach they belong to. I'm just cycling through those on screen. And the final part of the map frame itself is the breach label. So I designed kind of a more interesting label to add some extra information about the breach, so where it is located and what the levee looks like where it occurs. And these labels are actually auto-generated in InDesign using data merge. So to prepare for that, each variable component of that graphic layout is saved in a table. So there's a row for each breach and a column that contains the text variables that are going to be passed to InDesign on that graphic layout. So here in InDesign, I've composed the label box, and through the data merge menu, I can assign my, I don't think I mentioned it, but you have to save it as a CSV, that table. So through the data merge menu, you can choose that CSV as the data source, then apply variables to that graphic layout. You can preview it and cycle through each row. When you're happy with it, you can press merge, and then you get a label box for each breach scenario with the appropriate information. Here's the legend, and the legends exist as individual artboards in a single Illustrator file. And I mean, these begin in ArcMap. I pull out the legend from ArcMap, bring it into Illustrator, and use the color ramp basically to set up these legends. The scale does change for different depth rasters, so they need some individual care, but they are saved. Like artboard 1 is breach 1, artboard 4 is breach 4, etc. And we have the locator map. And the locator map is also composed in ArcMap, sorry. And this one is a little more interesting because there's two data frames. The data-driven page data frame is not actually visible when the maps are exported. The main map that's on the layout just serves as a single extent that highlights the current index feature. And again, these are all exported to PDFs, one for each breach. And here's the scale bar. This is actually also composed using data-driven pages on a layout that fits the width that I have on my full map, my final map composition. So the reason that I have 4 different sizes here is to control the scale breaks. You can, in ArcMap, assign a certain width that your scale bar has to stay at, and that gives ArcMap the control to break your scale at weird intervals. So instead of 1.1 or 1.2 miles, that's what ArcMap would give you, I've set up 4 different sizes where I control how the scale is broken. And down the road in InDesign, the way InDesign works, I can easily choose the best fit here. And I mean, the real reason behind that is my index features have a wide variety of sizes, so the scales are all over the board. And those are exported, again, to individual PDFs. The map caller is created in InDesign. It'll be eventually placed into the master page in InDesign. Serves as the background for every single page. So now I'll get into how to actually compose this layout in InDesign and generate each breach map. So as I mentioned, data merge requires a CSV of all the items to be placed as variables on the layout. So I need to inventory each one of those components that I've created for you. And I do this with DOS. So in the command line, first step is to change the directory to the folder containing my components. And these next couple steps here to get a list of files will be repeated for each of the components on the left there. So the command in yellow, cd changes the directory, and the parameter, the /d, changes the drive letter. You can look up DOS commands if you want, but I'm going to kind of gloss over that. And then my path, that's just a placeholder. You would replace that with an actual path. So next part is I need to list each component in those directories with its full path. So I do that with the dir command, dir. And you can see 2 versions of that there, each with a wildcard and either a PDF or JPEG, depending on which components I want to inventory. The parameters here, the /s, /b, give me the path in the format that I need. Just a path, no extra information, no file size, no time saved or anything like that. So I add a little bit to that last command to send that list of paths to a text file. And I use this command all the time, this kind of process. So this is just a side note, but I keep that files.txt open pretty much all the time in Notepad++. And as I execute this command, Notepad++ asks me if I want to refresh the file. Hey, it's changed. Do you want to refresh it? I say yes, and then right there I have access to my latest file dump. So then, as I generate those lists for each of my components, I copy and paste it into a table. So I'm getting that data merge source ready here. So I have 1 row for each breach scenario, and I have a column that contains the path to each of my components corresponding to the breach. A very important note, if you want to actually try this, is that InDesign will require a leading @ symbol for the column headings where you intend to place a piece of media. So this is how InDesign recognizes that it should be placing a picture or a Photoshop file or something like that instead of a string of text. So if you didn't have that @ symbol and you have a path, it's just going to put the path string up on your layout. So here's the completed table. 1 row for each breach and columns for each of my components. Save this as a CSV and then move to InDesign. So in InDesign, I have an 11 by 17 page laid out here. I have the caller Illustrator file placed in the background. And you'll also note that I have the legend placed here. It's a little bit of a cop-out, but these legends need individual care. I'm not really going to get into that, but once I place them right here, they'll be included on every page. I can go back and reassign the source to those. So you definitely can't see this in the back, I don't think, but in the data merge menu, it's just a little flyout menu. You hit the flyout and choose the data source to the link table, that CSV we created. And then what is in the panel there that might be hard to see is the field headings in my CSV. So those are my variables that I get to place on the layout. Next step is to add blank placeholder frames on the layout, corresponding to each of my component sizes, and then I assign the variables to those frames. So the process there is to click the frame and then click the variable to assign it. And the data merge menu allows you to toggle. What you're seeing is toggling a preview of what I'm going to get. And I can also cycle through each row. So this is just a preview of what I'm going to get when I actually merge this document, when it reads every row. And then when I'm happy with that, I hit merge, and then I have 25 map layouts done in a couple seconds there. So this really saves me a ton of time. Instead of setting up individual layouts, 25 of them, I can use this workflow to auto-generate them. It still needs some tweaking and some individual care, but it's 95% of the way there. And the real power with this is that that merged document maintains dynamic links to all those components. So I can go back to any component, make edits to style or content. So say a project manager really wants all the reclamation districts to be blue like this, like weird requests like that. I can go back in, export them, and overwrite the existing locator maps. And then in my merged document, there's a button to update all links, and that change is reflected on every layout instantly. So they're just going through those. Another major time saver is recycling that whole process. So I need to generate time to 1-foot inundation maps as well. And these layouts are very similar to the depth maps. So I'm reusing almost all the components, except I'm changing the depth raster to an inundation raster. So I can go back and reuse the ArcMap documents, go back to my initial InDesign layout, and then just inventory those inundation rasters, append my link table, and then in InDesign I can reassign the data source for this document, change the variable placeholder from the depth map to the inundation map, and then hit merge, and then I have another 25 layouts, one each for all of my 25 breaches. So I have 50 maps in a few minutes. Once all my components are ready, I can lay out maps very rapidly. So that's really it. Yeah, thank you. Time for questions?
Yes. 2 questions.
Thank you for the talk. It's a fantastic workflow, great example of some great tools between the different software and the choreography we go through as modern cartographers. I've been working with a similar workflow, and I've encountered a roadblock where I have a data-driven application, but I have 92 counties with fixed scale. So my page size changes depending on, so I would be curious if you've explored a similar workflow with constraints of your main map is at fixed scale, so page size changes.
I mean, I've done that sort of thing, but you have to kind of figure out how many different sizes you're going to end up with and make that flow work for each one of those different sizes, pretty much. That's the best I've done. So.
Any other questions?
This is great. Wondering if you've tried using Python to generate that final CSV table with all the links with format string, using Python with format strings.
That's a great idea. I would imagine it would be pretty easy if you're very stringent about directory structure and whatnot. So that'd be a good next step for sure. But I mean, this is kind of developed on the fly as I go and and all that. But I like that idea. Maybe I'll do that next year. All right, thank you.